walk.
I can't walk, dude. Hold on.
You're gonna
My
walk.
leg's broken. I just got thrown off the fucking balcony.
You didn't get thrown up. You jumped up. I saw you close the door. You told me you jumped. Come on.
I do it my whole...
It was supposed to be a day of joy, a celebration of life. But for Victoria Martens, her 10th birthday would mark the end of her innocence and her life. August 23, 2016, Albuquerque, New Mexico. Victoria, a bright and lively child, spent the day eagerly anticipating her birthday party. She loved gymnastics, the color purple, and weekends with her grandparents. Her laughter filled the air, a sound full of hope and excitement. To her, the world still seemed safe. That night, she called her grandparents, her voice bubbling with happiness. She talked about school, about her friends, about the cake she was looking forward to. It was an ordinary conversation, one filled with love and innocence. But what no one knew then was that this would be the last time they ever heard her voice. Victoria lived with her mother, Michelle Martens, in a modest apartment on the west side of the city. From the outside, it looked like any other home, a place of warmth, of security. But inside, the walls had a truth far more sinister. The choices Michelle made would not only shatter her daughter's safety, but seal her fate in the most unimaginable way. Michelle had a pattern. She sought out men online, inviting them into their home with little regard for who they really were. Some had troubling histories. Others carried dark secrets, ones that should have set off alarms. But Michelle ignored the warning signs, dismissing the dangers that slowly crept into her child's life. Then came Fabian Gonzales. He was charming, persuasive, and knew how to say the right things. But beneath the surface, he carried a past filled with violence and crime. And when he moved in, he brought someone else with him, his cousin, Jessica Kelly, a woman fresh out of prison. Jessica was unpredictable, unstable, and dangerous. Yet, despite the clear risks, Michelle allowed them both to stay. 3 days later, Victoria Martens was dead. Victoria's home was meant to be a place of comfort and safety. But behind closed doors, it became something far more sinister, a gateway for darkness to creep in unnoticed. Michelle Martens wasn't an abusive mother in the traditional sense. She provided food, shelter, and the basic necessities of life. But what she failed to provide was protection. Her judgment was deeply flawed, her choices reckless, and the men she allowed into her life carried shadows from their pasts. One of those men was Fabian Gonzales. His record was riddled with crimes, domestic violence, child abuse, and a history of drug-fueled aggression. But Michelle, desperate for companionship, ignored the warning signs and let him into her home without hesitation. And he didn't come alone. With him came Jessica Kelly, his cousin, a woman whose violent history made her a storm waiting to strike. Jessica had just been released from prison after serving time for assault and drug possession. She was known for her explosive temper and erratic behavior, a walking time bomb waiting to detonate. Yet, Michelle welcomed them both into the only world her daughter knew, making a decision that would seal Victoria's fate. In the days leading up to the unthinkable, the apartment pulsed with chaos. Neighbors heard the fight's angry shouts cutting through the night. They saw the strangers' figures slipping in and out at odd hours. The energy in the home had shifted. Something was coming, but no one intervened. No one called for help. And then, on the night of August 23, 2016, the darkness fully took over, and Victoria's story came to a horrifying end. The night of August 23, 2016 began like any other, but beneath the surface, something sinister was brewing. The walls of the small apartment in Albuquerque concealed a darkness that had been festering for weeks, a storm waiting to erupt. By the time the night was over, one of the most horrifying crimes the city had ever seen would leave its mark forever. Earlier that evening, 10-year-old Victoria Martens had spoken to her grandparents, her voice bubbling with excitement. She told them about her upcoming celebration, about the birthday cake she had been promised, and how she had laid out her favorite dress, eager to wear it the next day. She asked them if they would call her again in the morning, wanting to share every moment of her special day. It was an ordinary conversation filled with innocence and joy. No one could have imagined it would be her last. Her voice was filled with excitement. She had been looking forward to her birthday, expecting cake, presents, and laughter. She told them about her plans, about how she couldn't wait to wear her favorite dress. It was supposed to be a celebration. But as the hours passed, the atmosphere inside the apartment shifted. Voices were raised. Shadows moved erratically. The warmth of the evening was slowly replaced by a suffocating unease. Sometime in the late hours, the situation spiraled beyond control. The arguments had escalated into something more sinister. Furniture scraped against the floor. Objects shattered, and the walls trembled with the weight of violent commotion. Then came the chilling, unmistakable sound of a child's cry, cut short by a sudden, heavy thud. Silence followed, stretching endlessly, as if the entire apartment held its breath in anticipation of what would come next. Neighbors later recalled hearing sharp cries, muffled screams, and the unmistakable sounds of a struggle. A loud thud, then silence. Some turned their televisions up to drown out the noise. Others told themselves it wasn't their business. But just beyond those walls, a child innocent and defenseless was trapped in a waking nightmare. Inside, Victoria had become the target of an unthinkable betrayal. The people she trusted, her mother, Michelle Martens, and her mother's companions, Fabian Gonzales and Jessica Kelly, had turned into her tormentors. What followed was a sequence of horrors so vile, so unfathomable, that even seasoned investigators would later struggle to recount it. The details of what happened remain among the most disturbing in recorded criminal history, later revealed through forensic evidence and chilling confessions that would send shockwaves through the investigation. By the time the violence stopped, the apartment was eerily silent. Smoke began to billow from beneath the door. A final, desperate attempt to cover up the nightmare that had unfolded. The acrid scent clung to the air, masking the far more sinister reality hidden inside. As dawn approached, frantic knocking shattered the quiet. A neighbor opened their door to find Michelle and Fabian, disheveled, panic etched into their faces. "Jessica attacked us," they stammered. She heard Victoria. When law enforcement arrived, they pushed their way through the thick smoke, stepping into a scene that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. The air was heavy with the stench of burning fabric, but that was not what made the officers recoil. The sight before them was far worse. Victoria Martens was gone, and the nightmare was only beginning. The investigation into Victoria Martens' death began immediately, but nothing could have prepared detectives for what they were about to uncover. The crime scene was a chilling tableau of horror. Victoria's small body lay lifeless amidst the wreckage, her presence almost lost in the chaos of overturned furniture and charred remains. Blood stained the walls, stark against the peeling paint, and the acrid scent of burnt fabric mixed with something far worse, something primal and inescapable. The air was thick with smoke, the remnants of a fire set in a desperate attempt to erase evidence. But the damage was already done. What remained inside the apartment told a story of betrayal, cruelty, and unimaginable suffering. Detectives worked methodically, combing through every inch of the apartment, documenting bloodstains, broken furniture, and signs of struggle. Forensic teams began processing the scene, taking samples, lifting fingerprints, and collecting any trace of evidence that could piece together what had happened that night. The deeper they dug, the more disturbing the truth became. Michelle Martens, Fabian Gonzales, and Jessica Kelly were immediately taken into custody for questioning. Michelle was found pacing outside the apartment, her face streaked with tears, while Fabian sat slumped on the curb, his hands gripping his head in silence. Jessica, on the other hand, attempted to flee, limping away from the scene before officers tackled her to the ground. None of them resisted arrest, but their reactions spoke volumes: shock, fear, and in Jessica's case, the unmistakable air of someone with something to hide. Their initial statements were disjointed, riddled with inconsistencies, each suspect attempting to shift blame. Michelle, trembling and tearful, claimed that Jessica had attacked her and Fabian, and that she had no idea what had happened to Victoria. But her demeanor, the way her voice faltered, told investigators there was more to the story. As the hours stretched into the early morning, investigators pressed harder. The evidence spoke louder than the suspect's words. Michelle's DNA was present, but so was Fabian's. Jessica's fingerprints were found in multiple locations. But the most chilling discovery was yet to come. Victoria's body held the DNA of an unidentified male. This discovery sent a shiver through the investigative team. If neither Fabian nor Jessica matched the profile, then who else had been in that apartment? Was there another participant in this crime? One who had remained in the shadows? Detectives now faced a chilling question. Was the real killer still out there, walking free? Someone else had been in that apartment. Someone no one was talking about. The case that had already horrified an entire community was about to take an even darker turn. The trial of those responsible for Victoria Martens' death became one of the most closely watched legal proceedings in New Mexico's history. The community, still grappling with the horror of the crime, demanded justice. But the courtroom battle that followed was anything but straightforward. Michelle Martens, initially portrayed as a grieving mother, soon became one of the most controversial figures in the case. Her image crumbled when the prosecution played footage of her police interrogation, where she changed her story multiple times, at times appearing detached, even indifferent. The courtroom gasped as transcripts revealed her disturbingly casual admissions about the abuse her daughter had suffered. For many, that moment marked the turning point. Michelle was no longer just a mother caught in a nightmare. She was part of the horror itself. Under interrogation, she gave multiple conflicting accounts of what had happened that night, each version more disturbing than the last. Prosecutors alleged that she had allowed men to abuse her daughter in the past, making her complicity in the crime undeniable. However, Michelle's defense team painted a different picture, arguing that she was manipulated by Gonzales and Kelly, that she had been coerced into participation, and that she had no active role in Victoria's murder. The court struggled to unravel the truth behind her ever-changing testimony. Fabian Gonzales and Jessica Kelly faced their own damning charges. The prosecution laid out a harrowing case, detailing their involvement in the brutal acts committed that night. Kelly's history of violent offenses further cemented her as a central figure in the atrocity, while Gonzales was accused of orchestrating much of the crime. The most shocking element of the case, however, remained the presence of an unidentified male's DNA. Investigators scoured databases, tested multiple suspects, and even pursued leads that took them beyond the state, yet no match was ever found. Was this person another accomplice who had managed to escape? A figure lurking in the shadows of the crime, protected by silence? The unanswered questions cast a dark cloud over the proceedings, leaving both the prosecution and the public unsettled. The mystery of his identity loomed over the proceedings, raising disturbing questions about whether another perpetrator had managed to evade justice. Public outrage grew as the trial dragged on, with citizens demanding harsher sentences and accountability for the systemic failures that allowed Victoria to remain in such a dangerous environment. In the end, the court handed down its verdicts. Michelle Martens, after accepting a plea deal, was sentenced to 12 years in prison. Jessica Kelly, deemed the most violent of the accused, received 50 years. Fabian Gonzales, though his charges were adjusted, was sentenced to 37 years for his role in the crime and its cover-up. Yet, for many, justice felt incomplete. The defense scrambled to suppress its admission, but it was too late. Though it was not enough to reopen the trial, it deepened the mystery, leaving the courtroom and the public haunted by the thought that the true mastermind of Victoria's suffering had never been found. The presence of the unidentified DNA left lingering doubts, and questions remained about who else had been in that apartment on the night Victoria was killed. Despite the convictions, the case left a lasting scar on the city, a painful reminder of a child failed by the very people who were supposed to protect her. Each year, On Victoria's birthday, the people of Albuquerque gathered to honor her memory. They released white balloons into the sky, a solemn tribute to a little girl whose life was stolen too soon. Her story became a rallying cry for change, a symbol of the urgent need to strengthen child protection laws and prevent such tragedies from ever happening again. The trial of those responsible for Victoria Martens' death became one of the most closely watched legal proceedings in New Mexico's history. The community, still grappling with the horror of the crime, demanded justice, but the courtroom battle that followed was anything but straightforward. Michelle Martens, initially portrayed as a grieving mother, soon became one of the most controversial figures in the case. Her image crumbled when the prosecution played footage of her police interrogation, where she changed her story multiple times, at times appearing detached, even indifferent. The jury sat in stunned silence as Michelle's conflicting testimonies were played back, exposing her shifting accounts. Gasps rippled through the courtroom when transcripts revealed her disturbingly casual admissions about the abuse her daughter had suffered. For many, that moment marked a turning point. Michelle was no longer just a mother caught in a nightmare. She was part of the horror itself. The public, once divided in their opinions of her role, now overwhelmingly saw her as complicit in Victoria's suffering. The courtroom gasped as transcripts revealed her disturbingly casual admissions about the abuse her daughter had suffered. For many, that moment marked the turning point. Michelle was no longer just a mother caught in a nightmare. She was part of the horror itself. Under interrogation, she gave multiple conflicting accounts of what had happened that night, each version more disturbing than the last. Prosecutors alleged that she had allowed men to abuse her daughter in the past, making her complicity in the crime undeniable. However, Michelle's defense team painted a different picture, arguing that she was manipulated by Gonzales and Kelly, that she had been coerced into participation, and that she had no active role in Victoria's murder. The court struggled to unravel the truth behind her ever-changing testimony. Fabian Gonzales and Jessica Kelly faced their own damning charges. The prosecution laid out a harrowing case, detailing their involvement in the brutal acts committed that night. Kelly's history of violent offenses further cemented her as a central figure in the atrocity, while Gonzales was accused of orchestrating much of the crime. The most shocking element of the case, however, remained the presence of an unidentified male's DNA. The prosecution emphasized this as a disturbing loose end, arguing that it suggested the involvement of another unknown perpetrator. The defense, however, countered that the DNA's origin remained unclear and without a match. It could not be used to implicate any specific individual. Investigators pursued multiple leads, but every avenue led to a dead end, leaving the court and the public with a haunting question: was someone still out there who had played a role in Victoria's death? Investigators scoured databases, tested multiple suspects, and even pursued leads that took them beyond the state, yet no match was ever found. Was this person another accomplice who had managed to escape, a figure lurking in the shadows of the crime, protected by silence? The unanswered questions cast a dark cloud over the proceedings, leaving both the prosecution and the public unsettled. The mystery of his identity loomed over the proceedings, raising disturbing questions about whether another perpetrator had managed to evade justice. Public outrage grew as the trial dragged on, with citizens demanding harsher sentences and accountability for the systemic failures that allowed Victoria to remain in such a dangerous environment. In the end, the court handed down its verdicts. Michelle Martens, after accepting a plea deal, was sentenced to 12 years in prison. Jessica Kelly, deemed the most violent of the accused, received 50 years. Fabian Gonzales, though his charges were adjusted, was sentenced to 37 years for his role in the crime and its cover-up. Yet, for many, justice felt incomplete. The unanswered questions surrounding the unidentified DNA left a sense of unease, fueling speculation about whether another perpetrator had evaded justice. Though it was not enough to reopen the trial, it deepened the mystery, leaving the courtroom and the public haunted by the thought: that the true mastermind of Victoria's suffering had never been found. The presence of the unidentified DNA left lingering doubts, and questions remained about who else had been in that apartment on the night Victoria was killed. Despite the convictions, the case left a lasting scar on the city, a painful reminder of a child failed by the very people who were supposed to protect her. Each year, on Victoria's birthday, the people of Albuquerque gather to honor her memory. They release white balloons into the sky, a solemn tribute to a little girl whose life was stolen too soon. Her story became a rallying cry for change, a symbol of the urgent need to strengthen child protection laws and prevent such tragedies from ever happening again. The tragic case of Victoria Martens left an indelible mark on Albuquerque and beyond. It was more than just a horrifying crime, it was a wake-up call, a reminder of how the system had failed an innocent child, how warning signs had been ignored, and how justice, even when served, sometimes felt incomplete. In the years following the trial, the case sparked widespread discussions about child welfare policies. Lawmakers and advocacy groups pushed for stronger measures to protect at-risk children, emphasizing the need for stricter background checks, more thorough investigations into reports of abuse, and better support systems for struggling families. New Mexico, shaken to its core, implemented reforms aimed at closing the gaps that had allowed Victoria to remain in harm's way. The reform is never truly complete. There is always more to be done to ensure that no child slips through the cracks. Despite these efforts, the lingering mystery of the unidentified DNA remains. Investigators continue to follow leads, hoping to one day uncover the full truth of what happened that night. But for now, the identity of that unknown individual remains elusive, a shadow hanging over an already devastating case. If you have any information, no matter how small, authorities urge you to come forward. Justice for Victoria is still unfinished. For the people of Albuquerque, Victoria's memory endures. Her name is spoken with reverence, her story shared as both a cautionary tale and a call to action. Every year, on August 23rd, the city gathers to release balloons into the sky, a silent promise that she will not be forgotten. But remembrance alone is not enough. We must be active in preventing future tragedies, in protecting vulnerable children, and in demanding accountability from the systems meant to safeguard them. Victoria Martens was a child who deserved love, safety, and a future. Though her life was taken far too soon, her legacy lives on not just in the hearts of those who mourn her, but in the laws and protections inspired by her tragic fate. And for as long as her story is told, there remains hope that no other child will suffer the same fate. May we take a moment to honor Victoria's memory. May her soul find peace, and may her spirit shine as a light that guides us toward a world where children are safe, loved, and protected. Let us remember her not just with sorrow, but with purpose, to stand up for those who cannot stand for themselves, to listen when cries for help go unheard, and to demand a system that refuses to fail another innocent child. Victoria, you are not forgotten. A personal reflection and prayer. As we reflect on this tragic case, let us remember that behind every crime, behind every headline, there is a life, a child, a soul, a future that was cruelly taken away. Victoria's story is not just hers alone. It represents countless others who have suffered in silence. We pray for Victoria and for all the innocent lives lost to violence and neglect. May their souls rest in eternal peace, free from the pain they endured. May their stories serve as a reminder of our duty as a society to protect the most vulnerable, to listen, and to act swiftly when danger looms. We also pray for strength for those who fight tirelessly to bring justice, for the families who grieve, and for the communities that mourn. May we all be granted the wisdom to recognize the signs of abuse, the courage to intervene, and the determination to ensure that no child suffers alone. If you ever suspect a child is in danger, do not hesitate. Call the authorities, reach out to support organizations, and be the voice that could save a life. We cannot undo the past, but we can choose to be vigilant in shaping a safer future. A truth one shadows, We believe that stories like Victoria's must be told, not just to honor the victims, but to ensure that justice continues to be sought and systemic failures are never ignored. If you want to stay informed on cases like this, subscribe to Truth One Shadows, where we uncover the darkest corners of true crime, always in search of the truth. What do you think about this case? Do you believe justice was truly served, or are there still unanswered questions? Join the conversation in the comments and let us know your thoughts. Share this story to raise awareness and ensure that Victoria's voice is never silenced. Together, we can demand change, hold those responsible accountable, and fight for a world where no child is left unprotected. Victoria was an innocent child who deserved love, care, and a future. Her story is heartbreaking, but her memory must serve a purpose to push for reforms, protect children, and demand accountability. May her soul rest in peace, and may we, as a society, learn from her tragedy. May no other child suffer in silence, and may we all be brave enough to speak up, strong enough to act, and determined enough to ensure that true justice is never left incomplete. If this case teaches us anything, it is this: when a child is in danger, hesitation can be fatal. Speak up, act fast, and never assume someone else will step in. Let me know if you'd like me to add anything else or expand on certain aspects.
She has a little girl inside the house.
House.
How old is your daughter? 10. Oh, yeah, she's 10.